For this project I worked together with the team from We Are Knitters, and if you don't know the site, please go ahead and check it out. They have amazing things. They are famous for their knit and crochet sets and have a great collection of different designs. Whether you want a scarf or a hat or a sweater, with each set you get everything you need to knit the design yourself, like the needles, the yarn and of course the instructions. And also they have their own yarn, which is 100% Peruvian sheep's wool, and it's nice, it's big, it's really chunky for 50mm European sizes. But they have many other things to discover, so go ahead, check the link in the description box and take a look for yourself. In this tutorial I'm gonna show you how you can knit this big and chunky beanie yourself. It's very easy to make, so it's perfect for beginners, and you will not need circular needles for this one because this is knitted flat, so it's not knitted in the round. And the best thing is you can wear it inside out on both sides. So you have stockinette stitch on the inside and reverse stockinette stitch on the outside. As you can see, the beanie hat is part of a set together with the quick loop scarf. And of course you can order this design at the We Are Knitters website and you get a complete package where everything is inside you need for this tutorial. I hope you will knit this beanie hat and this scarf for yourself and have lots of fun, and I hope you enjoy, and good luck! For this tutorial I used very big straight wooden needles from We Are Knitters in a European size 15 or a US size 19. And because this hat is not knitted in the round, you can also use straight needles for this project. And this is the yarn I've used. It's called the Wool from We Are Knitters, of course. The color is mauve and it's a very big and chunky yarn. It's 100% Peruvian sheep's wool and it's nice and soft, but as every pure sheep's wool, it has this natural and rustic touch. And these are the other two colors. One is called pink, the other aquamarine. I loved them both. They are beautiful. Their color range is changing throughout the year, so check out which colors are new at the moment. And I really enjoyed working with those and I can recommend them. If you order the set from We Are Knitters, you will find a small label to either sew on your hat or on your scarf. In the set you will also find a darning needle, and you will need one for this project. And finally you need a measuring tape and some scissors. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is make a gauge or a test swatch so I can calculate how many stitches I'm gonna need for the beanie hat. So I'll lay my tail yarn over my left hand thumb, go with the needle from behind under the front yarn and pick the yarn from the index finger, pull it through the hole that came in the middle. Then I don't push on the or pull on the working yarn too tight, and this is your first stitch. So the other stitches are fairly similar. You just go with your needle under the front yarn, you get your working yarn from the index finger and pull it through. The important thing is don't pull on your yarn too tight. You don't want your first cast on row be very tight because it's not going to stretch later on. So you really need to be very loose and very soft when you pull those two strands together. These are my very loosely cast on 10 stitches and I'm gonna knit them in stockinette stitch or reverse stockinette stitch. Just depends on which side you look at them. And my first row are purl stitches to make my stockinette stitch. So you make purl stitches by having your working yarn in front of your left needle, as you can see here. Then get with your needle inside the stitch, and with the tilt motion of your left hand, you kind of lay the yarn over the needle. Try to do all the motion just with your left hand, and you will see it will be much easier for all your purl stitches. And the most important thing is make the stitches as loosely, as wide and as soft as possible. You don't want very tight stitches, you really want them to be very loosely and very soft. So don't pull on your working yarn when you make your stitch. And here's my first row of purl stitches done. Here you can see the purl stitch is very good. So now I can turn my work, and on the other side you see knit stitches. And it depends on which side you refer to as the front or the back. You are knitting stockinette or reverse stockinette stitch. because it doesn't really matter. The hat will be or can be worn from both sides, so it's really fine. On the side where you see the knit stitches, we are only gonna knit stitches. So this would be the stockinette stitch. For the knit stitches, the working yarn is behind your left needle, and again, with the tilting motion of your left hand, you lay the working yarn over your needle. And of course, try to make these stitches again very loose and wide, and you can really see how big the stitches are that I just made here. I find it easier to knit loosely when I push my needle wider or deeper inside the stitch. Just don't pull on your working yarn. If you find that hard, you can not wind it twice, but only once around your index finger. This way you can just be sure you cannot pull the working yarn very tight, because you don't have the power from the winding on your index finger. So just lay it once over your index finger and be sure to make loose stitches. And here's my second row done. I can now turn my work and I will see purl stitches, and since this is stockinette stitch, whenever I see purl stitches I will knit purl stitches. So try to do this for the next 10 rows, purl stitches on the purl side, knit stitches on the knit side, and remember to make all the stitches very soft and loose, and just take your time. After around 10 rows, this is what your piece should look like, and now we can measure it out and calculate our gauge. It doesn't matter if you measure it out on your knit or your purl side, both is fine. You will need your measuring tape to measure out your piece, and maybe you need to roll out the corner stitch because it tends to roll inwards depending on which side you look at it. Now measure it just laying flat somewhere. Don't try to stretch it, just measure it out just like it is. Mine is about 18 to 19 centimeters wide, which is in inches 7.1. So now I write down my 10 stitches. Were about 18 centimeters wide, or in inches this would be 7.1. You can use whatever number you want to use. I want to know how many stitches fit into 1 inch. For this I have to divide this number by this. 10 stitches divided by 7.1, and the result is approximately 1.41. So now I know into 1 inch fits about 1.41 stitches. Now you need your head circumference. My head circumference is about 61 centimeters, which is around 24 inches. But I don't use this number for calculation. I use always 10 centimeters less, which would be 51 centimeters or around 20 inches. So for your calculations, don't use your actual head circumference, but use 4 inches less. This is because the stitches will stretch when you put the head on your head, and I use this technique always, and it always fits perfectly. So use 4 inches less than your actual head circumference. And now you can multiply your 20 inches with the number of inches that fits in, number of stitches that fits into 1. And the result is around 28.2. So now I know I would need 28 stitches with my head circumference, with this needles and this wool, and I will cast on this 28 stitches now. For casting on, I take my yarn and I leave about 40 inches as a yarn tail, and the casting on here is the same as when we made the gauge. Try to make it very loose and soft. Don't pull the 2 strings too tight. Every first cast on row is not flexible. That is why you really need to make your stitches wide and soft and loose. Just take your time and cast on how many stitches you need. So these are my 28 stitches, and when I now turn my work, I can start to knit. The main part of the beanie will be in reverse stockinette stitch, which means the front will be in purl stitches and the back will be in knit stitches. Now, these kinds of patterns tend to roll inwards or outwards on the ends. So to prevent that, we're going to make the first 3 rows in garter stitch, because garter stitch does not roll inwards or outwards on any side, but just lays flat. And additionally to that, we're going to make these first 3 rows very, very tight. You want your head to be a bit tighter at the beginning than the rest of it, so it fits you better. And we achieve that by just making the first rows tighter. Also, I will make a starting stitch and an ending stitch. I don't know if this is common internationally, but we do this in Germany, so that you get a nice pattern on the sides of your knitting piece. A starting stitch you do by inserting your stitch from the outside, not the inside, and your working yarn is behind your needle. You get your working yarn, you put it through the stitch and let the stitch go from your left needle. This is a starting stitch, and you will do this to every first stitch of every row. All the other stitches in this round will be made in knit stitches, since we are making the first 3 rows in garter stitch. And again, try to keep the stitches as tight as you can, and for that I found it easier to not insert my needle so deeply. I try to just insert the tip of it, and I really put my working yarn very tight. I pull it, and this is how I achieve tight stitches. So again, the rest of your row, knit stitches until you come to your last one, and the last one will be an ending stitch. I'm going to show you that in a second. And this is my last knit stitch before my ending stitch. And now for the ending stitch, you need to put your working yarn before your left needle, and then just slip the last stitch from the left to your right needle. Slip as if to purl, and this is how you do an ending stitch. You actually don't knit it, you just slip it over onto your right needle. Then you can turn your work and start again, of course, with a starting stitch. And you will see, because we had that yarn in front of our needle, it is now on the back and it's easier to get it. But I find that the first stitch, whether it's a starting stitch or a normal stitch, is always a bit tricky, and the other ones just go much easier. So this is our second row, and again, as you can see, knit stitches, since we are making the first 3 rows in garter stitch. Still try to keep it as tight as you can, and on the last stitch make an ending stitch. So put your working yarn in front of your left needle, slip the last one from the left to the right as if to purl. Then you can turn your work, and we start with the last row. This is the 3rd row now. And here, just the same as before, the first stitch is a starting stitch, and the other ones are knit stitches that you try to keep as tight as you can till the end. And at the end of your 3rd row, you make an ending stitch again. Then you can turn your work and you are in row 4. Here we start with our main pattern that will be reverse stockinette or stockinette, depending on which side. I say that my front side is reverse stockinette, so the front side would be from here on now just purl stitches, and the back side would be stockinette with knit stitches. And also, we finished the first part of our head that should be tighter than the rest, and we can now start to make it from row to row more and more loose and relaxed. So this row, the 4th row, will be not as tight as the one before, but not completely loose. Just try to make it a bit more relaxed, a bit more loose than in the rows before. And at the end of row 4, we make, as usual, an ending stitch with the last one. We can then turn our work, and you can see we have 2 knit rows above each other. And on this side where we see the knit stitches, we will only make knit stitches, since this is our inside the stockinette side. So again, keep in mind, this is row 5. Try to make it gradually from row to row more and more relaxed, and the stitches wider and wider. Here you can see my stitches, and you can see that they are no longer so tight around my needle, and this is what you want to have. Here is the end of row 5. The last stitch, of course, is an ending stitch. When you turn your work, we are on row 6, and you see we have the side where you can only see purl stitches. Actually, the first 3 rows are garter stitch, but they look like purl stitches. They look like reverse stockinette stitch. So on this side, you will only make purl stitches. Again, try to get looser from row to row until you have it as loose as you had it in your gauge. The last stitch, again, is an ending stitch. We can then turn the work. We are now in row 7. And in row 7 you can see really nicely how the pattern is coming. And again, after your starting stitch, you just keep on with your stockinette pattern. One side just knit stitches, other side just purl stitches. And here you can see really good how big my stitches are now, how wide and soft they are. This is what you want to have. And from now on, whether you're in row 7 or row 8, from now on, just keep it as loose and relaxed and soft and big as possible. From now on, just keep repeating this pattern. Don't forget that your first and your last stitch is a starting and an ending stitch. And keep going until you have your piece around 23 centimeters long or 9 inches long. And this is the first part finished. Please click on the link in the window to get to the second part, or use the link in the description box under the video. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you are successful and lucky. I hope you like my little outtakes here with our dog. And I see you in the next part. Bye!